All right, let's jump right in. We're doing a deep dive today into some really fascinating ancient texts.
Yeah, specifically a couple of excerpts from the commentary on the Dhammapada.
Right, these bits that sort of give the backstory to the verses.
Exactly. They provide context, why the Buddha said what he said,
Hmm.
and they're incredibly rich, even though they're, well, quite brief.
And the ones we're looking at today focus on two really insightful stories about these eminent female disciples of the Buddha, the Bhikkhunis.
That's right. And our goal here is to kind of unpack these accounts, see what qualities the Buddha really chose to highlight in these very realized women.
And figure out why those particular qualities were singled out, right? Like why those aspects prompted a whole Dhammapada verse.
Precisely. And how the commentary helps us understand that significance.
There's definitely some intriguing stuff here. We've got like a celestial king popping in for a visit and disciples showing up in ways you really wouldn't expect.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Let's see what these encounters can tell us about, the path to awakening.
So, okay, the setting. It's the same for both stories we're discussing. The Buddha is staying at Vulture Peak.
Yep, Gijjhakuta Mountain, a really key location in the Buddha's life.
In both cases, the context is that Sakka, the king of the devas, the gods, he arrives with his whole entourage in the first watch of the night.
Right. Specifically to visit the Buddha. He pays homage, sits down respectfully, to one side.
And listens to a Dharma talk, something that apparently prompts some recollection for him.
Yeah, it establishes this common ground, this particular moment in time that both stories spring from.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Even the king of the gods is coming to learn. And it's right in this setting with this, important visitor present that our first story kicks off. So this is the context for Dhammapada verse 283. And into this scene comes Khemābhikkhunī.
She's intending to see the Buddha, and the text describes her arrival in a really striking way.
How so?
It says she comes via the air. The Pali is a Kasanagans.
Via the air. Wait, like flying? Seriously?
It certainly seems to suggest that. An extraordinary level of attainment, a mastery over the physical, you could say.
Wow.
And it gets even more specific. It says she sees Sakka there, pays homage to the Buddha while still in the air.
Mid-air bow.
That's the description. Akasi hitetava vanditva. And then she just returns, leaves.
Okay, I can totally see why Sakka would be like, whoa, he's the king of the devas, right? Sitting there, listening respectfully, and this human nun just flies in, bows, and flies out.
Exactly. It makes perfect sense that he'd turn to the Buddha and ask, Bhante, who was that? Who just came, stood in the air, paid respect, and left.
Right. So what does the Buddha say?
Well, he identifies her quite simply at first, my daughter Khema.
Okay.
But then his immediate description of her, prompted by this specific interaction, it focuses right on her key spiritual qualities.
Not the flying part.
Not correctly, no. He calls her great in wisdom. That's Mahapanya.
Mahapanya. Great wisdom.
And skilled in the way and the not way, Magamagasakōvida.
Skilled in the way and the not way. Interesting phrasing.
So yeah, her incredible entrance, this sort of miraculous arrival, it actually serves as the cue for the Buddha to highlight her profound wisdom, not her, psychic powers.
And that leads directly into the Dhammapada verse number 208.
Which goes, the one deep in wisdom, sagacious, skilled in the way and a not way, attained the highest goal, that one I call a Brahmana.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit based on the commentary. Deep in wisdom, Gambhira Panya. What kind of a wisdom are we talking about?
Well, the commentary says it's not just being, generally smart. It's wisdom related to really profound things, like the aggregates, the khandhas.
Building blocks of our experience.
Right, and it's also described as wisdom like the energy of the Dharma.
The energy of the Dharma, that sounds potent.
It really does. It suggests a wisdom that isn't just sort of dry intellectual knowledge, but something vibrant, penetrating. An insight that comes from the practice and empowers it.
And sagacious, meta view.
The commentary basically says that's possessing this kind of insightful wisdom we just talked about.
Gotcha. And then skilled in the way and the not way, magamagas or kafida, being an expert in that, what does that look like?
It means knowing with absolute clarity the path that leads towards suffering in lower realms, dugati,
right.
The path leading to happiness in heavenly realms, shugati, and crucially the path to nibbana itself, nibbana samago. But and this is just as important, they know exactly what is not the path.
The imago, the dead ends, the detours.
Exactly. The distractions. They can discern it perfectly.
So like having perfect spiritual GPS and attain the highest goal.
The commentary confirms that refers to attaining arahata, her haship, the final goal.
So Khema flies in, which is amazing, but the Buddha uses that moment to praise her deep wisdom, our ability to see the path clearly as the defining quality of someone who's reached the ultimate goal. A true Brahmana, by his definition.
That's it, precisely. And interestingly, the text notes that at the end of this whole discourse, this teaching moment that Sakka's question about Khema kicked off, many people listening actually attained stages of awakening, like Sotapadhi, stream entry.
Wow. So her presence and the teaching it prompted had a real impact. Okay, that's incredible. Praise for wisdom after flying in. Now, let's switch to the other story, Dhammapada 275. This one features Kisāgotamīvatthu. And it sounds like there are a lot of parallels.
There really are. Strikingly so.
Yeah.
We're still at Vulture Peak. Sakka's still there.
Still the first watch of the night?
Yep, still first watch, listening to the Buddha.
Okay.
And just like Khema, Kisagotami comes intending to see the Buddha. And the text says she also arrives via the air. Kazanaganfa.
Again, she flies in too.
Seems so. And again, she sees Sakka, and then she just returns. Nivadi. One source does mention she paid homage before returning, just like Khema did.
So Sakka sees another highly realized nun make an aerial entrance and exit. He must be thinking, what is going on here?
You'd think so. And sure enough, he asks the Buddha again, basically, who was that one, Bhante, who just came and then turned back upon seeing you?
And the Buddha's response?
Again, he starts simply, my daughter, Kisagotami.
Okay.
But this time, the quality he immediately highlights is different. He says she is foremost among the theory wearers of rag robes.
Tasukali Katerina Aga.
Exactly. Foremost among those nuns who wear robes made from discarded cloth, from rags found in cemeteries or refuse heaps.
Okay, so that points immediately to a very different emphasis. Not wisdom primarily, but austerity, renunciation.
Absolutely. It highlights her dedication to a specific, quite demanding ascetic discipline, a focus on non-attachment to material things, even basic comforts like new robes.
Right, and the verse the Buddha recites then reflects this aspect of practice. Verse 275.
It does. He says, the creature wearing rag robes, lean, covered with veins, alone meditating in the forest, that one I call a Brahmana.
Okay, let's unpack that description with the commentary. Lean, covered with veins, kisa dhamanasantatta. That sounds, well, pretty intense.
The commentary explains this isn't just a casual observation. It says that those wearers of rag robes who really commit, who fulfill their practice properly, they become physically lean. Their bodies become dhamanasantattagata, covered with prominent veins.
So it's like a physical sign of their commitment.
Exactly. It signifies that their rigorous discipline, their detachment, has had a visible physical effect. It's almost like their body bears witness to their intense spiritual effort.
Wow. It's the practice embodied, literally. And alone meditating in the forest. Akavanasmishanta.
That just emphasizes her dedication to solitude, to practicing meditation alone in secluded places, vividahani. It highlights that aspect of the path, withdrawing from the world for focused practice.
So, okay, with Khema, her aerial arrival prompted praise for profound wisdom and path mastery. With Kisagotami, a similar arrival prompts praise for her disciplined asceticism, her rag robe practice, her solitary meditation. Very different facets being highlighted.
They really are. Yet clearly, both are presented as paths leading to the highest realization. Both women are obviously highly attained.
And the outcome is the same again, people getting insight.
Identical to the previous story. The text notes that at the end of this discourse, prompted by Sakka's question about Kisagotami, many listeners also attained awakening fruits, like Sotapadhi.
It's really fascinating seeing these two stories placed, seemingly side by side in the commentary tradition. The parallels in the structure are just so clear.
They really are. Same place, Vulture Peak, same visitor, Sakka, same time, first watch. An eminent bhikkhuni arrives.
Via the air?
Right. Sakka asks this question. The Buddha identifies her as his daughter, gives a relevant Dhammapada verse.
And people gain insight. The framework is almost identical.
And those similarities, they really make the differences stand out, don't they?
Totally. With Khema, it's all about that deep discerning wisdom, Panya. Understanding reality, navigating the path.
While with Kisagotami, the emphasis shifts to rigorous, disciplined practice, asceticism, solitude, the embodiment of renunciation.
So both women are clearly highly realized, capable of things like, well, flying.
Which seems almost incidental in the teaching moment.
Right. But the lesson drawn from their presence focuses on these different yet fundamental aspects of the path. And in both cases, the Buddha concludes by calling them a Brahmana.
And that's really key, isn't it? This is where the power of the teaching, the sort of radical redefinition comes through so strongly.
Because Brahmana back then was all about birthright, wasn't it? The highest social caste.
Exactly. Determined by birth, by lineage. But here, the Buddha applies this highest designation to these attained disciples, including women, who certainly wouldn't fit the traditional definition. He's completely turning the meaning on its head.
He's saying, look, true Brahmana status, the real mark of spiritual nobility, it doesn't come from your family or your social standing.
It comes from your inner qualities, your attainment, whether that's profound wisdom like Khema or dedicated discipline practice like Kisāgotamī.
It shifts the whole focus from external labels, things you're born with, to internal cultivation, things you achieve through effort.
It's incredibly powerful, a complete revaluation.
So thinking about this, what does it tell us? For you listening right now, what can you pull from these parallel stories?
Well, I think one big thing is just how diverse the paths to realization can be, even within the Buddha's own teaching.
Yeah, it's not like there's only one single narrow way to reach the highest goal.
Right. It could be primarily through cultivating that deep wisdom, seeing reality clearly, or it could be through really rigorous, dedicated practice, ascetic discipline, solitude, or more likely for many, some combination.
Different qualities might just be more prominent in different people, but both approaches, when fully developed, lead to the same place, arahata.
It really makes you consider, how might we identify or cultivate qualities like this deep wisdom, this penetrating insight in our own lives? Or how might we cultivate that kind of dedicated practice, that discipline Kisāgotamī embodied?
Both are valued. Both are valid paths. So, just to wrap up then, these two stories from the Dhammapada commentary, they look really similar on the surface, but they powerfully highlight these two distinct facets of spiritual excellence.
Yeah, profound wisdom on one hand and discipline practice on the other.
And both lead to the ultimate goal. Both earn the highest praise from the Buddha, who uses that term Brahmana to signify this inner attainment, completely separate from birth or status.
Redefining excellence based on cultivation.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we, or maybe society in general, tend to define people by these external labels, by their background, or maybe just one single achievement or characteristic?
We put people in boxes.
Yeah. And these stories, they really invite us to look much deeper than that. They suggest that true spiritual excellence or wisdom, or whatever you want to call it, it can manifest in all these wonderfully diverse ways.
Rooted in that inner work, that cultivation, which is often unseen.
Totally unseen, even when apparently it might just allow you to, literally fly in for a quick visit.
Yeah. Definitely a good thought to sit with.